Good morning.
Kate Clatterbach.
Yes.
Miss Virginia Volunteer 2023.
I am.
So tell us how you got started with this venture.
Absolutely. So in 2021, I came across Miss Virginia Volunteer on Instagram. They had just started the program. It was in their inaugural year, so there wasn't a title holder yet. And I really felt like my life was put on pause after COVID. Like, college was weird. There was nothing really going on in my community. And so I just wanted an opportunity to do something again. And so I reached out and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll give it a shot. And so I started with Miss Virginia Volunteer in their inaugural year. I was second runner-up to the first Miss Virginia Volunteer, Brianna Turner. I spent the second year as a local title holder representing Danville, my hometown, and really got into it probably a little bit more than I should have. And I had a great year, and I walked into that second year knowing if it's not me, I've done everything I possibly can. And so when I was crowned Miss Virginia Volunteer 2023, in August of 2022, I really just started the ground running, and I loved every moment. The organization is so new, so there's just no blueprint for what you have to do or what you need to do. And so I just got to do everything I wanted to do, which was the best part.
So tell us about your platform a little bit, and tell us about your year and what is involved in that year, because there's so much traveling, there's so many things, there's speaking engagements. I mean, I don't think the public in general understands any of these systems and why young ladies get involved, what they really get, what they put into this, which is a lot.
Yeah, well, I think it starts out with knowing that every person who's involved is volunteering their time. And so even though I had a business manager who was the president of our organization, so he was doing two jobs, he had a full-time job. And so there was no way that he was able to travel with me to these locations or even spend all of his time finding me appearances and things. So that really fell back on me a lot of once I really started rolling and I sent him too many emails of all the ideas I had. I had to do a lot of my own booking and own traveling. And so I started out the year as Miss Virginia Volunteer. The Monday after I won, I started my teaching position. First year teacher, first day with sixth graders. And that was a whirlwind of an experience because being a teacher is crazy, let alone being a teacher and a title holder. And so the first couple of months, I was taking a day off every 2 weeks to travel, whether that was to appearances or just to take some time to actually catch up visiting sponsors or planning presentations for upcoming weeks. And I started really feeling like what was calling me more to Miss Virginia Volunteer was, as a teacher, I could only get so far in the life of a child, but as a title holder, you really can make more of an impact, and you really can speak to them more truthfully about who you are and what you really care about. Whereas a teacher, you have to really stick to that education boundaries, especially in the climate that we're in right now. And so I decided to leave my teaching position in January, and that was the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, I sobbed for days in my classroom with my students about having to leave them, but I just knew that it was going to be more beneficial to the organization for Miss Virginia Volunteer, but also just for me and the experience I was having. And so after I stopped teaching, my life as Miss Virginia Volunteer just blew up. And what we really needed, we are a second year program really looking to make some stronger holds in our state. And so we created 3 new statewide partnerships. One was with Bedford County Sheriff's Office with DARE programming, something that's expanding in our state, doing DARE programming in communities. We also connected with YOVISO, which is Youth of Virginia Speak Out About Traffic Safety. It's a statewide peer-to-peer education program all about how to be a safe driver, how to be a safe passenger. And then just in March, we created a partnership with Amtrak Virginia. And so I got to go on a tour of Virginia, 8 communities in 5 days, just on the train, hopping off the train, visiting people, and just really getting to see how that mode of transportation is, one, cheaper for many people, but also is really connecting our communities in Virginia. And so with those 3 partnerships, January to May really looked like a lot of traveling. I made it to all 8 regions of Virginia. That was one of my biggest kind of goals as a title holder was I didn't want to just be a title holder for this area, but for all areas. And so with those partnerships, but also just the connections I was making across Virginia, I traveled over 20,000 miles across the state and just did appearances, whether it was like speaking in schools or I really prioritized volunteerism because that's in our name. And so I served over 100 hours just with our community members, whether that was at food banks or at clothing drives, things that really mattered to the communities that we were in, which was super exciting. And then in June, I competed at Miss Volunteer America, where I placed 4th runner-up to our new Miss Volunteer America, Hannah Peregrine.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So for people that don't really understand the components, let's talk a little bit about the judging components.
Yeah.
So there's 4 components?
Yes.
That right? So tell us all about it.
Yes, so every area of competition is 25% of your overall score, so they're all weighted equally. We have interview, fitness and wellness, evening gown, and talent. Fitness and wellness is a swimsuit portion, which is a hot topic in pageantry these days, but I really enjoy it because I think what gets lost in people's minds about the fitness and wellness portion is that women are willingly there. They willingly sign up. They willingly choose to be in that portion. And I've seen some of the women that I recruited for our 2nd year or our 3rd year at Miss Virginia Volunteer, who were the most nervous about that category, come out of that experience and talk about how empowered they felt. And I think at the end of the day, that's what matters the most to me is how empowered I feel after fitness and wellness, just to take care of myself and to get up on stage and be confident. And so those are the 4 areas. Talent is always fun for me. I'm a storytelling artist, so I do spray paint and a poem I've written about women in our history. But every area has its own like benefits and drawbacks. I think in interview, what I love about the Miss Volunteer America system is that there's 10 job competencies that the national organization puts down throughout the states of what they're looking for in a title holder, and that's really what your interview is based around. So it's less political questions and more questions about how would you handle these situations, what would you like your job to be as Miss Blank Volunteer. Like you really get to talk more about the job rather than outside factors.
Awesome. So getting back to the wellness and fitness, I think what's very important for all the young ladies to know that compete is that they're all winners. Everybody's a winner, because I know when I was watching a couple of weeks ago, I sat there by a chair and I thought, it takes so much courage and strength for these young ladies to do this. And I would never do that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't even want to look in a mirror, so I'm surely not going to get up on that stage like that. But give us a little insight on interacting with these other young ladies. I mean, I know from some volunteerism I've done, most of you all that compete, even though you're competing, you really become more of a team and you grow so much stronger together. So what's been your experience behind the stage?
Yeah, absolutely. I've made some of my closest friends from Miss Virginia Volunteer from the first year. 2 of our local title holders that year carried on throughout year 3. And so we were in it together from the very beginning. But what I really feel like brings us together is you don't understand what a pageant experience is like until you do it. It is nonstop, day in and day out, even preparing. Like, you are comparing yourself to these other women, but I think what's most important about pageantry is that you're competing against your best self. So if you don't put your best self out on that stage, then that's where you messed up rather than someone doing better than you. And I think at the end of the day, too, every single woman is bringing something different to the table. And so if you use that opportunity to learn about those individuals and what they're doing in their lives and being appreciative of that, I think that matters more than can they sing better than you? Can they do a turn on stage better? But specifically in fitness and wellness, this year, so I helped a lot with the rehearsals, and my favorite was the teen fitness and wellness rehearsal because they really got into it. We had this song playing and they were just like strutting up and down the stage, not even following the walking pattern, but just like really having fun as a group of 6. And I think that's a moment that I'll always remember of them just genuinely enjoying the week and enjoying what they were doing rather than getting caught up in, can I do this better than, number 5, or can I do this better than I did yesterday? It was just all about actually being there together and having fun.
Well, that's amazing. And I think that, again, I think people get closer and closer and closer. Mm-hmm. And I think part of volunteerism, and I think part of being just a good person is helping other people. Mm-hmm. And I was sorry that I didn't go to the preliminaries, because when I looked at some of these young ladies, I thought I would have liked to have seen, actually from the beginning, mm-hmm. from the inception of all of these contestants entering and where they started from, because I could tell that most of these young ladies had had a tremendous amount of growth in a short amount of time.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is what it's all about. It's all about, Miss Virginia Volunteers, all about empowering women, which is dear to my heart and is so incredibly important. Tell me though, when you're being interviewed, because you're not being interviewed now really, we're having a conversation. How do you feel? What gives you strength to think and to think fast?
Oh, interview is one of my favorite, but also my, least exciting moments of competition, because I really go in there with a business plan. Like I don't prepare very much when I go into interview, because I just know that I'm a person who, if I give myself words to say, I will say those exact words, and it won't actually really resonate with the judges. And so when I walk into an interview, my preparation before that has really just been looking at a piece of paper and writing down my business plan and what I would do and why it matters. And leading up to Miss Volunteer America, I spent a lot of Tuesday mornings at Starbucks. That was just the day I would go and interview prep. And I would sit there for about 4 hours and just make list upon list of what needs to change in the organization. How can I do that? How can I implement those changes? And then relating it back to what I've already done. And I think that's the biggest point for me in interview prep, is if you can link everything to a plan that you have, to something that you've already accomplished, then you're going to go in there and be able to talk about anything in the whole world that they could ask you about, because you've already given an example of how you can accomplish that. And so for me, walking into my Miss Virginia Volunteer interview in 2022, but also into the national interview, I just kept reminding myself, I've already done the job. Like, I already know I can accomplish the things I want to, because I have. And I know that if I haven't accomplished a piece of that, it's because I haven't had the opportunity yet. And so I think that's what brings me strength in those moments, is just knowing that I'm capable. But at the same time, I think knowing that those judges, they don't want to have an awkward 10 minutes. Like, they want to have an enjoyable 10 minutes. They did not spend their whole week in a random city with random girls to sit there and just critique everyone, because that's not fun. And so I think that's what I remind myself as well, is they're just there to learn about you, and it's not as, filled with pressure as it could be.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you got stumped before.
Yeah. Absolutely. And on the easiest questions. I mean, one of the questions I got to my Serve Initiative, which is the platform in Miss Volunteer America, is all about women's history and how we need to talk more about it in education. And one of the judges asked me, what was my favorite woman in Virginia history? And I couldn't think of one woman in Virginia history. And that's just something that I should have prepared for, you would think, coming from Virginia. And I made up a woman. I was like, so I just made someone up. And I was like, yep, we're going to go with this. We're going to hope you don't know. And I think it went well. That was the year I won Miss Virginia Volunteer. So apparently they didn't care that I made up a woman.
Well, see, Well, they were talking during the competition. Somebody, Pocahontas came up.
Yeah, absolutely. Annie Mowry, our new Miss Virginia Volunteer, her platform is also really rooted in history, but telling the true stories of women's history. And so for her, what really matters is that we're really telling the truth behind these stories rather than the Disney versions, specifically Pocahontas.
Yeah, life is not full of fairy tales.
It is not.
So let's talk a little bit about preparation, hair and makeup, what you wear, because, and I think this is another thing that's so good for every single one of these young ladies that competes, because unlike me, who does not only dress for success, it's not my thing. I would rather be in blue jeans or red overalls and have a weed eater. So how do you decide? How do you pick? How do you choose? How do you, when you're in the mirror, what's too much eyeshadow? What's too little? What's too many curls in the hair? What's too revealing that you put on versus what's proper but gives you a little bit of an edge? How do you decide? It's a lot.
It's a lot.
I don't think people realize how much every single thing that you put on, every outfit, is a reflection of you. And it's also being judged, which women of power and success tend to look like women of power and success. So, unfortunately, people do look when you enter a room. It's that, they like somebody within the first 5 seconds. So, what goes on in your mind?
Yeah, well, I think for me, I was so lucky that our executive director, Vicki Runk, is just so good at fashion, because when I started out, within the first 2 days, she just was like, Kate, you're just too plain. Like, we're going to have to spice you up. And that is the truth. I just have always been very I just like solid colors. I wear black a lot, as you can see. And so I just, even in my wardrobe for Miss Virginia Volunteer, I did add a little spice to it. Volunteer blue is like my thing. And so I wore blue in every category. But I knew that going into the national competition and going into the year as Miss Virginia Volunteer, I was going to have to spice it up a little bit. And so she definitely helped me understand what it meant to be a fashionable title holder. But also for me, I had admired pageant women for years. In high school, my whole Instagram feed, all of my social media was just following all of these state title holders in different systems and just looking up to them more for, the work that they were doing, but also in how they were making themselves appear. And so I kind of looked back and just saw kind of what they were wearing at different moments. And within the first month, I put in a really large order on Amazon of all the clothes I would need for the year. And my biggest goal, I think, in fashion, just going into appearances and things, was one, I wanted to feel very professional, and every single event that I had, I really felt like I could come out with some sort of connection that could build the organization, whether that was a sponsor or a donor or just a new voice to add to what we were doing. I wanted to make sure that I was presenting myself in a positive way. And so that was one area for wardrobe, but also I think I wanted to really reflect what the national organization was looking for, and making sure that on my social media throughout the entire year, you were seeing somebody that was capable of being in that top 5, who didn't halfway through the year decide, oh, now I should start, putting on makeup before I go out in the world, or now I need to think about what I look like on that national stage. But really every moment thinking about that, my hair and makeup skills have just expanded tremendously. Skyrocketed. I didn't even really know how to curl my hair, 5 years ago, and now I do it almost every day, and so that was really awesome. And then, of course, with Miss Volunteer America, you can have a hair and makeup artist at the national competition, and that's what we chose to do for me. I don't think Vicki trusted me to put on the amount of makeup that I needed to go out there on that stage. But that was really interesting, because when you sit down with a makeup artist right before competition, they're like, okay, what do you want? And you have to make all these decisions, and you're like,
well, you're thinking that's what you're here.
Yeah, you should know. Look at me, tell me what you think. And so I really enjoyed that part, just because I didn't have to focus so much on doing it, but I got to make decisions about what I looked like, which was fun. We changed it up every day based on what I was wearing, and I really got to know Bobby was the woman who worked with me, and I just really got to know her and her story and how she got really connected in pageantry. And so it was a good way to calm down after a week of, you don't have your cell phone, you don't have your friends and family, you're just on lockdown.
Well, I know from being involved in the Miss America system, which I was involved in, I don't think that the public in general understands the stress and the pressure that each and every one of you are under. I think that one of the components that I constantly was looking for when I was watching people that were competing was, is this person going to last? Because it might be before a local pageant, or it might be halfway through getting ready for, in this case, Miss Virginia, and then you think, oh my gosh, well, what if we crown Miss Virginia, and then all of a sudden she can be Miss America, but in her head, all of a sudden she says, do I really want to do this? Is this really my passion? Is this the way I want to live my life? am I going to spend the next 365 days of the next year being under a microscope? And quite honestly, it's a vast microscope. And everybody's judging you, everybody's critiquing you. It's not, the thing that bothers me about pageant systems, regardless of what they are, is that the general public doesn't understand the true purpose of pageant systems, and they should educate themselves before they say anything.
Yeah.
And number two, they don't understand the stress. So when you gave the crown up,
Yeah.
what was your first thought? How did you feel?
Honestly, that whole day, I just felt so excited. I think we have a legacy wall at the Bella Vista Hotel, and it's just me and Brianna, and thinking about there was going to be someone on that stage that was going to be added, I think that's what made me the most excited. It was very stressful. I mean, as a title holder, I got messages on social media about how awful I was. I got comments that I had to delete. In person, I had people say things to me. I was in a parade one time, and people will yell stuff at you the whole time you're in parades. People don't realize how rude people can be in parades. But this one woman just yelled, and she was like, well, how can you volunteer with a crown on? And it was just like, okay, obviously I take the crown off before I'm doing manual labor, but right now I'm in a parade. And so it was just things like that, it wasn't, comments about myself didn't really bother me. Like I struggled a lot in high school with self-image and body issues and those sorts of things, and I worked very hard in college to really become more of a strong and confident woman. And so things that people were targeting at me specifically didn't matter as much as things that were targeted at the overall organization, because I think being a representative of Miss Virginia Volunteer came with that added pressure of people don't know who we are yet because we're still growing, we're so new. And so establishing ourselves is really what made the most impact for me, and what was the hardest to realize was when people were making snide comments about being negative about the state organization or the national one or just pageantry in general. It's like you just don't know.
Well, I think one of the things that really bothered me when I was involved was that people thought that the swimsuit competition was an exploitation of women in general. And I think that most of the pageant systems have listened to the public. And so now people, hopefully, if they listen and they pay attention, they understand that that's really about wellness and fitness. So I also don't think people realize that every young lady has a platform. And there's a lot of volunteerism, there's a lot of days spent after someone is crowned, that they're out on these speaking engagements. I know that, how many miles did it was said at the last of the pageant? How many miles did you travel?
Yeah, like over 20,000.
In a year.
In a year.
20,000 miles. And then for any one person to have a negative connotation about a young lady wearing a crown absolutely amazes me. I would like to see that person get in the car and go with you and keep up with you for 20,000 miles.
It was crazy. It was crazy. And I think what's interesting to me about the fitness and wellness competition, people that have negative comments about it, is every woman's journey is different, and I do recognize that there are women who now struggle with body issues because of that competition, because they put themselves in a position to where they were being judged for something that, they were looking around and they didn't look like everyone else. But for me, that area of competition almost saved me a little bit from myself. When I started out with the organization, I was so busy in college. I had a full-time class load and I was working 4 jobs on campus, and I would rarely eat 3 meals a day. Like maybe I ate 2. I would always skip breakfast because I didn't wake up until the very last second. And sometimes lunch was just like, do I have time? And so when I started competing that first year, I looked back at photos and I was just like, I just don't look healthy. Like I was skinny, but I didn't look like what I wanted to look like. And what was also very important for me that first year was I wore a one-piece, because one of my friends in Tennessee, she had just competed at Miss Tennessee Volunteer, and people had made really negative comments about you can't wear a one-piece in pageantry. And so I decided I'll wear one piece in pageantry. And she was a larger woman. And so for her, it was more about, if you don't have the confidence to wear a two-piece, then you shouldn't be in pageantry. But for me, when I wore a one-piece, it was more about, well, I have the confidence to do that and to make it into the top 3 in a one-piece. Like, you can accomplish those things if you're not ready for that two-piece in the pageantry world. But then, looking towards the second year at Miss Virginia Volunteer, I knew I didn't necessarily want to think about fitness and wellness in terms of being the most lean or being the most muscly or anything like that. I just wanted to know that my lifestyle was healthy. And so I started eating 3 meals a day and actually going to the gym and all those sorts of things. And what I learned was so much more than just like how to cook myself a meal, but even down to cardio. Just I drop weight like crazy with cardio. And so I do very little cardio, and I do a lot of weights and a lot of like HIIT training, that kind of thing. And that really is what benefits my body more than what other women might have to do for theirs. And so I think that at the end of the day, I learned so much more about my body and what my body can handle and what I can push myself to do, rather than just, do I have the abs to walk in a bikini on stage?
Well, I've never had the abs to walk bikini on stage. So.
It was like halfway through my year as Miss Virginia Volunteer, looking towards that national pageant, I was just like, you get all these opinions, right? When I was preparing for that state competition, it was just me and my mom. Like, we were the two making the decisions, and my mom she doesn't make a lot of opinions because she knows I'll just disagree with her. And so it's just me making all the decisions. And so then going into nationals, everyone was giving me their opinions. You walk into this board who they have these ideas. They've been to a national competition. They know what they're looking for, which is very beneficial. But halfway through, I was like, I'm not even doing this for myself anymore. Like, I'm just doing it for them. Like, what is going on? And so I had to make a decision right then and there, like, what are things that are non-negotiable for me that I will be doing at nationals, just because that's what matters to me. And one of those was my fitness and wellness, of what I wanted to look like. I didn't want to listen to other people's opinions. I just wanted to do it the way that I had done it, more because I wanted to feel like that part was empowering for me, rather than I was making my body look like what other people wanted it to look like. The other one was wearing dinosaur earrings in my interview, which I accomplished.
I think that's awesome,
Yeah.
actually. And you have someone in your life that's involved in HR, and I have, as a real estate broker, I have worked with a lot of HR departments because they would send me their people moving in from out of town, or people that they were shipping out to another location they have. And in working with a lot of the HR people, one of the famous questions was, if you could be any animal, what animal would that be? So would you be a dinosaur?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. I love dinosaurs. I don't know what it is. I think it's just, they're cool. Like, that's really the only thing I've got. I don't really love the real life ones, but like the cuddly, cute, those are my favorite. A classroom when I was a teacher was dinosaur themed, which didn't really win a lot of points with the 6th graders, but it should have.
It should have.
Yeah.
Well, they're just, as we get older, we want to be more young at heart.
Exactly.
When we're young, we want to be old.
Yep.
And run the world.
Yep.
So next, you're working with Runkin' Pratt.
I am.
So that's your full-time job. And what's your continuation going to be with this system?
Yes, so I'm just staying on with Miss Virginia Volunteer kind of however they need me. So whether that is as assistant business manager for Annie, or, helping with her prep, I think I really want to get more involved in the teen program. Right there, I'm just really open to anything. I kind of am just the catch-all for, that's kind of what I do at Runkin' Pratt too. I'm just the catch-all for things that are falling through the cracks. Yeah, exactly. And I love it. Yeah.
She needs that. Well, we're out of time.
Oh, no. Okay.
It flies.
It does.
Kate Clatterbach, I look forward to working with you and seeing you, because I think that I have been reeled into this system once again. Yeah, so we'll see.
Yes, absolutely.
I've already got my place in Jackson, Tennessee for next year.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Have a great week.